And we are live. We are live on Facebook and X and Rumble, YouTube, and live on Instagram as well. Okay, so we're live on Rumble as well now, and this will also be put into a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts when we're done. Welcome everyone. We are going to answer the question today. Is the United States of America predicted in the book of Revelation in Bible prophecy? That's our question. That's what we're going to try to answer today. I'm going to give you the short version. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The United States absolutely is predicted in Bible prophecy. This is one of the most amazing subjects in prophecy that I have ever studied. And whenever I present it, there's always somebody who is just shocked and amazed at this. Let me say up front, I'm a patriot. I believe in the U.S. Constitution. I believe the U.S. Constitution was inspired by God in the sense that it was based on the Bible. The principles of the Bible were put into the U.S. Constitution. It doesn't mean we're a perfect country. It doesn't mean we started as a perfect country. I mean, any country that has fallen humans in it is not going to be perfect. I mean, just read the Old Testament, even God's people, the children of Israel, it was not a perfect country. But I do believe that the U.S. Constitution was designed by people, by a Protestant nation who was trying to follow God, and the principles of the Bible, they, to the best of their ability, put into our very form of government. So the question we're going to ask today is the United States predicted in Revelation? The answer is yes. And like I said, even though I am a patriot and I do love this country, I think it is the best country on this planet today. You know, God doesn't hold back punches. So he's going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? I mean, he does that with his people in Israel in the Old Testament. He did that with his servants, with David. You know, God doesn't sanitize. And so the United States of America, the warts are also going to be discussed in Bible prophecy. It's predicted. The country is predicted before it happens, which is the amazing part of prophecy. All right. So let's back it up a little bit. This is a part of our series on the New World Order and Bible prophecy, and we're almost done. This is our second to the last presentation on the New World Order and Bible prophecy. The entire thing has been about the New World Order and Bible prophecy. Today's subject, America and prophecy, we are on part 8 of 9. In our series. If you have not watched the others, I highly recommend going back, and they are on the YouTube. I'll get them up on Rumble eventually, but they are all up on YouTube. There's a whole playlist on this series. I recommend watching those, particularly if you have not yet, you want to make sure to watch Daniel 7 and the Little Horn, because we're building on that today. Okay, what does Bible prophecy say about America? Let's get right into it. Well, we want to look at where did the American freedoms come from? And we looked at this already when we looked at the American liberties versus the beast, the tyrannies of the beast power, which we already discussed. Let me make this a little larger on the screen. Here we go. We looked at the American freedoms before, but the question is, where did they come from? Where did these liberties come from? Where did we get these ideas? Well, we looked at some of the events that led to the founders of this country designing a country with liberty, and it was because of the previous experiences in Europe. And we looked at something called St. Bartholomew's Massacre on a previous video on this in this series. And we looked into how that event, that unity of church and state enforcing their belief systems, this was the Catholic Church enforcing Catholicism on Protestants in France, And the massacre of anybody who disagreed, the massacre of the French Protestants, that was part of what led to the American Revolution. This is known history. The Protestants of that time began to question, look, if the authorities, if the church and state is united and they are going to persecute us to the extent where we cannot even believe something that they disagree with, we can't believe the Bible the way that we read it without being massacred like this, then, oh, hold on, let me make sure I get this presentation back on there. I don't know why I kicked the screen off. Sorry, one second. There we go. Sorry about that. So they said, look, if we're going to be massacred for our beliefs, then maybe the idea that Bible-believing Christians can rise up against their own government and fix it, which they did in a revolution, maybe that's not the worst idea. And so it began to get Protestants to even debate the idea whether or not they can rise up against their own government, which they did, and which the American colonists eventually did. He said, enough with this, enough with this. So you have to realize the experience of the colonists and how against tyranny, not only on the government side, but on the religion and church and state uniting, how much that shaped their mindset. We don't think in those terms today because we do not live in a world where there's church and state united. In fact, we have the other extreme, right? And we talked about this before, where we have leftism forced on us. But the colonists had a much different experience. So you got to put yourself in their mindset. Okay, the beast versus American liberty. Where did these liberties come from? This subject of the USA and Bible prophecy, I'm going to tell you right from the beginning, it needs some setup, okay? And it's crucial that you understand this setup, because if you understand the history and the setup, then it becomes very obvious where the US is predicted in the book of Revelation. But you got to understand the setup first. So I'm going to try and make this clear while also going through it quickly, because I want to get to the USA part, but you got to understand the background history, because the US shows up at a certain point in the stream of history. So we need to actually start in Revelation chapter 12 and just really look briefly at the idea of the Catholic Church ruling Europe before we get to the US, because the US's rise was really a reaction to the rule of the Catholic Church over Europe for 1,200 years, centuries. So in Revelation chapter 12 and 13, what you're going to see there is two phases of the Roman Empire. And once you see this, it will become obvious to you once you see it. Revelation chapter 12, and we're going to compare verse 3, Revelation chapter 12, verse 3, with Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. So if you don't have your Bibles, get them out. I'm going to read this to you. So this is Revelation chapter 12, verse 3. And I want you to notice the comparison between these two verses, the parallels. It says, "And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns." Okay, you're going to see that again in chapter 13. A beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. But note this part, it says, "and 7 crowns on his head." So he has crowns on his head. Okay, what do crowns symbolize? Well, generally they symbolize royalty. And the crowns are on his head. Now it says he has 7 heads and 10 horns. We talked about this before. These 7 heads, we are told in Revelation chapter 17, are 7 mountains. That's Revelation chapter 17, I believe, verse 5. 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And then it tells us in Revelation 17, verse 18, and we've discussed this before, the woman is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So the city that sits on 7 mountains would be the city of 7 hills. That would be the Empire of Rome. And notice here that this This beast, this great red dragon, in Revelation chapter 12, it says the crowns are on the heads. The seven heads is the city of Rome. It's the seven hills of Rome. In other words, this is describing when there were Caesars, when there was a crown in Rome. This is the Roman Empire phase. Now, remember, I said that there's going to be two phases of Rome discussed in Revelation chapter 12 and 13. So now let's go to Revelation 13, verse 1. And you're going to see some similarities, but you're going to see a difference also. And I stood upon the sand of the sea. This is Revelation 13, verse 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, same thing. The Bible does, especially prophecy, repetition over and over again. Same thing, slightly different to give you another angle. We've already looked at this concept. So it's the same thing. Now it's called a beast, but it has 7 heads and 10 horns. It's the same power. But now notice there's a slight change. It says, upon his horns, 10 crowns. Oh, so now the crowns have moved. They're no longer on the head. They're no longer on the 7 heads. They're no longer in Rome. The Caesar is no longer in Rome. Now the crowns are upon the 10 heads. And what did we learn the 10 heads were? In Daniel chapter 7, which describes the same thing, it's a beast that comes out of the sea with 10 horns. It's the 4th beast of Daniel chapter 7. It's the same thing. So what did those horns symbolize in Daniel chapter 7? It's the same power. We are told that these 10 horns are 10 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. What that is it's the division of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is divided into 10 pieces. We looked at this when we looked at, I think it was, which number of the series was this? If you haven't watched this one, go back and look at part 3, Prophecy 101, Daniel 2, and Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. And we saw that the Roman Empire is not conquered by a 5th empire, but instead the Roman Empire, the 4th empire, is divided into 10 pieces. Okay, so we looked at this already. Okay, so the 10 horns symbolize the 10 divisions of Rome. That was when the Roman Empire broke up into pieces. And so now, which is basically what you have today, it's Europe divided into all these little kingdoms. So now we're looking at a different phase in Europe. Now there's no more Caesar. Now the crowns are upon the 10 horns. Do you see the slight difference? Instead of the crowns being in Rome, now they are upon the 10 horns, the 10 kings, the division of the Roman Empire, the little kingdoms, France, Spain, the UK, like all these little countries in Europe. Used to be one in Rome, now it's all divided up into 10, about 10. Okay. Moving on. So this is Revelation 13, verse 1. We're back there. It says, upon his horns, 10 crowns. Now notice this. And upon his heads, the name of blasphemy. So now there's something different upon the 7 heads. In chapter 12, there was the crowns there. There was a Caesar in Rome. Now on the heads, there's the name of blasphemy. There's someone different in Rome. It's no longer the Caesar, but now it's somebody with the name of blasphemy. That's the papacy. That's the papacy. The ruler from Rome, the ruler of Europe, is no longer a man who's just a Caesar, who's just a regular king, but now it's a man who claims to be the vicar of Christ. He claims to represent Christ on earth. He claims to sit in the very seat of God on earth. It's the name of blasphemy. It's the man who claims to be, his titles are all blasphemous titles. His name is a blasphemous name. So these are the 2 different phases of Rome. Rome started originally a republic, but it was the Empire of Rome, right? And then it divided up into pieces, and a new king so to speak, came up in Rome, which is the Pope, and ruled still from Rome. That's why it's called the Roman Catholic Church. But now he is a religious ruler in that same area. So these are the two different phases of the Roman Empire. And if you ask Catholics, many of them, especially if they're well informed, will tell you, I mean, I see it all the time. I see it from Catholic, large Catholic influencers accounts on X and on social media. They'll say, hey, the Roman Empire never fell. It just evolved. And they'll do this with a picture of the Pope in the Vatican, as if this is the new Caesar. It's the idea is that the Roman Empire never fell. It just went into a new phase. And that's all I'm saying, is that Revelation 12 and 13 shows the two different phases, which they admit. That's why they call themselves the Roman Catholic Church. Did you know that the Roman Catholic Church, when they were first arguing that they needed to have supremacy over all of Europe, this is, the early Middle Ages, they argued that we are basically the new Caesar. And because the New Testament, like the book of Romans chapter 13, because Paul said things like, hey, you need to submit to the powers that be, they argued, well, that was talking about the Roman Empire, and we are the new Roman Empire. Therefore, you must submit to us. And that was their argument for why they should have rule over all the empires and over all the churches. And if you disagreed, well, St. Bartholomew's Massacre and things like that. Okay, that's just history. Again, and I've said this before, if you're new here, I'm not attacking Catholic people. I'm talking about history, and I'm talking about the leadership. This is nothing against Catholic individuals. I have no hate for any Catholics. I was raised Catholic, plenty of family members who are Catholic, plenty of people who are in the Catholic Church who I think will be in heaven. I'm sure there will be tons of Catholics in heaven. So don't misunderstand me. All right, with that out of the way, let's keep going. So Revelation chapters 12 and 13 both are talking about the papal rule in the Middle Ages. That's the main subject. It's the papal rule in the Middle Ages, which lasted for 1,260 years. And we talked about this before. Again, this was in a previous lecture. So if you haven't watched this whole series, go back and watch that. We went over how even Catholic sources say the church ruled for 1,200 years. They said that. Okay. So verse 6 in particular, this is Revelation chapter 12, verse 6. It talks about the woman. Remember what a woman symbolizes in Bible prophecy. Remember, we looked at this. A woman in Bible prophecy is a symbol for a church. It could be a good woman or a bad woman, like in Revelation 17. This one in chapter 12 is a good woman. And so this is a symbol for the church. It says, and the woman, verse 6, Revelation 12, verse 6, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. 1,260 days. Okay. And we know that a day in Bible prophecy is a year. We've looked at that already before. That is found in Numbers and in Ezekiel. And it's the principle behind Daniel chapter 9, which points to Jesus, the time that Jesus would come. It predicted the year that Jesus would be crucified and would be first baptized and then crucified. So that is predicted in Daniel 9. A day for a year principle is foundational to proving that Jesus is the Messiah. You get rid of the day for a year principle and prophecy, and you can no longer point to Daniel 9 that proves that Jesus is the Messiah. So it's very firmly, and plus you can just tell the way that this is worded. Who says 1,260 days? Who talks like that? Nobody would list days, that many days. You maybe say a couple days, 10 days, something like that. But once you start getting over 30 days and half a year and stuff. You start talking in terms of months and years, right? But instead it says 1,260 days. That's weird. That's a hint. This is symbolic. It's a day for a year. So 1,200 years. Everything here is symbolic. I mean, we're talking about a dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, right? So this is speaking of the 1,260 years of papal rule. Now, when was this? It started in 538 AD and it went to 1798. Those are the exact dates. I don't have time to go into all the details of that right now. If you want to know more on the dates, and this is going to be a very heady book if you want the source materials, there's others that talk about this. Doug Batchelor does some great stuff on it on YouTube. You can look up Doug Batchelor in 1,260 years and you can find it pretty easily. But if you want the sources, like the history, there's a guy by the name of Heidi Hykes. It's a gentleman, it's a professor, Heidi Hykes. And he's got a book on a source book, 538 source book. And he gives you all the history. Basically what it shows was this was the year 538 AD when the Catholic Church, the popes were granted by the previous rulers, like Justinian and so forth, some of the leaders in that time, they were granted the power to have church and state united and to have where the church had control over all the governments. And so the governments had to do what the church said. And that started in 538 AD. And the Catholic Church basically admits this. They basically admit, and I gave you the quotes on this in a previous lecture, by about 600 AD, by that time, which is what they'll say, it's firmly established that their power was in place by about 600 AD, and to about 1800, so about 1,200 years, they ruled Europe. They ruled Europe. And this is not even really debatable. This is just history. I mean, you can get mad at me for this if you want to. Some Catholics may get mad, but it's just history. All you got to do is Google who ruled Europe during the Middle Age. Just Google it, and it'll tell you the Catholic Church ran Europe. They were in charge. I mean, this little kingdom over here tried to rebel for a little while and so forth. And history's never black and white. But generally speaking, and that's what prophecy usually deals with, is the general idea. The Catholic Church, the Pope, ruled Europe for 1,200 years. And that is covered in Bible prophecy. Absolutely. Why would it not be? And they did bad things. They did some good and they did some bad. And why would that not be covered in prophecy? What does the Old Testament do? It discusses the good and the bad. And so do you think that God would talk about, hey, maybe you shouldn't have been burning some Christians at the stake, right? Of course, that's discussed in prophecy, and it's discussed in Revelation chapters 12 and 13. Now, let's read chapter 12, verse 13 through 17. We're almost done with our history, and then we're going to jump into the USA in prophecy. We need to set it up, though. So Revelation 12, verses 13 through 17. So this chapter is about the war in heaven, right? And you see these things, and it's Michael and his angels versus the dragon and his angels. But really what we see behind, that's behind the scenes. What we see on the earth is a battle of empires. And we see Satan working through empires like the Roman Empire to attack God's people. So the dragon persecutes the woman. Revelation chapter 12, verses 13 through 17. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, so he was cast out of heaven unto the earth, he persecuted the woman, that's the church, which brought forth the man-child. Who's the man-child? That's Jesus, by the way, if you didn't know. The man-child is Jesus. This is discussed in Revelation chapter 12. Let's see. Verse 5, talking about the woman. It says, and she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with the rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Do you know that that's quoting the Psalm? I believe it's Psalm 2, which is a messianic psalm. Let me read that for you real quick, just so you don't take my word for it. He rules all nations with the rod of iron. So this is Psalm chapter 2. And if you look at Psalm chapter 2, the title of it in many Bibles will give you like a title, and it says it's the triumphant Messiah. Psalm chapter 2 is about the Messiah. And you read Psalm 2, and it says in verse 7, I will declare the decree, the Lord has said unto me, thou art my son. This day I have begotten thee. Who is this talking about? This is talking about Jesus. And he says, ask of me, and I will give you the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. So who's ruling with over the earth with the rod of iron? It's the Messiah. So Revelation chapter 12 here is quoting from Psalm 2, a messianic psalm. And it says, here's this woman. I'm giving you the background here on this chapter. Here's this woman, Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. 12, that sounds like the 12 tribes of Israel or the 12 apostles. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. She's about to give birth to a child. Then it says, there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his and 7 crowns upon his heads, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. What's that? Well, the Old Testament says the tail is the false prophet who speaks lies. So the dragon, which is the devil, we're told in verse 9, the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. The devil used his tail to take down the stars. Who are the stars? It says he drew a third part of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. Well, verse 9 says the dragon was cast out. He was cast into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So what are the stars? They're the angels that he deceived with his tail, with false prophecy. Okay. The devil deceived a third of the angels and tricked them, and they were kicked out of heaven. So we're taken behind the scenes to the war in heaven. And these events are not happening simultaneously. In Revelation 12, it mixes these two things. The devil was cast out of heaven long ago. He's been cast out of heaven, and he fell and he tricked the angels long, long ago, and he's been deceiving the nations. And ever since, the Garden of Eden, he's been deceiving. But it mixes these two things to show that the battle against the church is just a continuation of the devil's battle against God and his angels in heaven. The two are mixed together. Old Testament does that all the time. It mixes current events with like messianic prophecies. The two will be mixed together because one is similar to the other, even though they are not contemporaneous in time. Okay. So and then the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her child as soon as it was born. Who tried to kill Jesus as soon as he was born? Well, King Herod did it, but who was Herod? Herod was a Roman puppet governor, puppet king over Israel. And who did he send to kill Jesus? Roman soldiers. So who was the power that stood before the woman and tried to devour her child as soon as it was born? That was Rome. That was Rome. Absolutely. This great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns is the devil, but also Rome. It's both, same time. It's the same thing as Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, which we talked about, where it shows the king, but it shows that Satan's behind the king. So this is the Roman Empire, but it was Satan using the Roman Empire to try to kill Jesus as soon as he was born. You get it? All right. Now let's go back. Revelation 12, Verse 13. When the dragon saw that he was cast out unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. So he's now going after the church. Why is he going after the church? Because Jesus, the man-child, was caught up to God's throne. Jesus isn't there to attack. So what can I do if Jesus isn't here? Go after the church. Go after his people. Verse 14, and the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time. What is time, times, and half a time? It's the same time period that we saw in verse 6. Notice the parallel. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God. Same language, that they should feed her there. Nourished, fed, it's the same thing. It's a parallel verse. That they should feed her there for 1,260 days. So verse 14 and verse 6 parallels, saying the same thing. The woman goes to hide somewhere. She's hidden by God in the wilderness somewhere for 1,260 days. What is that? It's 1,260 years. Why does it say a time, times, and half a time? I know I'm moving fast. You can pause this and rewind later if you want to hear it again. Why does it say a time, times, and half a time? What is that? It's a weird way of saying a time period. So that makes you think it's probably symbolic, right? Yes, it is. A time is a year. And we find that in Daniel chapter 4. A time is a year. Times, plural, that would be 2 years, smallest plural you can have. And half a time. So 1 year plus 2 years plus a half a year is 3.5 years. And you know what? 3.5 years is the exact same thing as 1,260 days if you do a 30-day month. It's the exact same thing. So it's the same time period. It's the same. It's the Middle Ages. It's the 1,260 years. So the woman is hiding in the wilderness during the 1,200 years of papal rule of Europe. She has to hide in the wilderness. Yeah, that's like the Waldensians. And if you look at history, there was the churches that were hiding in mountains because the Catholic Church would persecute them. This is just history, predicted before it happened. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as of a flood after a woman, that it might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Well, obviously this is symbolic, but what does it mean? Well, what is water in prophecy? We learned that Revelation chapter 17, verse 15. We already looked at that in the previous lecture. It says in Revelation 13, verse 15, and the waters which thou saw where the whore, this is the harlot, where the whore sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Water symbolizes multitudes of people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So when the dragon casts out water like a flood, it send a bunch of people after her. And if water symbolizes people, then what would a flood symbolize? That would be a destructive group of people. That would be like the military, right? And that's exactly what the Catholic Church did. It sent soldiers after the Waldensians to kill them. That's history. It's just history. In fact, the Catholic Church apologized for it. They admitted it. Now notice this, because this is where we're going to get into the USA. I know we've been going for a half hour. It's going to be simple once we set the background, but this is where we get into the USA. Verse 16, and the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. So the woman flees from the tyranny of the dragon by going to the earth. Remember that. She goes to the earth, and that helps the woman hide from the armies of the dragon. What is the earth? This is very important because we're going to see this when it talks about the USA in prophecy. Well, if the water symbolizes peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, then what would dry land symbolize? The lack of people, a place where there's not a lot of people. So the woman, the church, the Christians flee from the Catholic Church and they go to a place where there's not a lot of people. Okay. Now we've set the background. Now let's move on. Is the United States predicted in the book of Revelation? Absolutely. Consider this, and we're going to look at that. Keep that earth part in your mind, that the earth helps the woman. We're going to come back to that in 1 second. Consider this. The United States is the largest superpower in the world right at the end of time. The most powerful country in the world right at the end of time. There's very few people who would disagree with the idea that we are close to the end of time. Okay. The United States is also the largest Protestant Christian nation in the world, most powerful. Wouldn't it make sense, therefore, that God would speak about this nation in prophecy? The largest Protestant, most powerful nation in the world, Christian nation, right at the end of time. You don't think God would mention that country in Bible prophecy? It makes perfect sense. So yes, he did, of course. So we looked at this. The woman flees into the wilderness to get away from Catholic persecution. The earth helps the woman during the Dark Ages. Who founded America? Pilgrims. Pilgrims. Why did they come here? They came here to flee persecution from the Catholic Church in Europe. That's what it was. So they went to an unpopulated area to get away from the persecution in the old world. That sounds a whole lot like Revelation chapter 12. The woman flees into the wilderness and the earth helps her. So where did they go? They came to the New World, this largely unpopulated area, and prophecy says the earth helped them. Where did the second beast rise from? So now we're getting into Revelation chapter 13, verse 11. Let's look at that. And we are going to see this is the rise of the United States in prophecy. Revelation 13, verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake like a dragon. Now, this is very different than the first beast. Verse 1, it says, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. The first beast comes out of the sea. It comes out of a place where there's a bunch of water. And we learned that the water is peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So it makes sense that a country would rise out of a heavily populated area. But now we see a country coming up out of the earth, which means a place where there's not a lot of people. It's unpopulated. A beast rises up out of the dry land, out of the earth. That's interesting. Who does that sound like? What nation rose up out of a largely unpopulated area after Christians fled away from persecution from the Catholic Church in Rome, and they came to an area where they could find refuge, where the earth helped them, and they started a new nation? Oh, that sounds a whole lot like the United States, right? I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. Just compare Revelation 13, verse 11 with the end of Revelation 12, verse 16. It says the earth helped the woman. And now we see a beast rising up out of the earth. Okay? The founding of America is a continuation of the woman fleeing from the dragon. That's what it is. That's what it was. That's why we have liberty in this country. Therefore, it makes sense that America is described as a lamb. It's a Protestant Christian nation. Oh, okay. Let's back up a second. Note this. Read this again. Revelation 13, verse 11. I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb. That word lamb, it's used, off the top of my head, I think it's 13 times in Revelation. Every other time that it's used in the book of Revelation, it's talking about Jesus. Every single other time. Next chapter, Revelation chapter 14, talks about a lamb standing on Mount Zion with the 144,000. It's talking about Jesus. And in the seven seals, it talks about a lamb as it had been slain. It's talking about Jesus. Every time it says a lamb in Revelation, it's talking about Jesus, except this one time it describes a beast, which is a country that looks like a lamb. What would that be? That would be a Christian country. It at least looks like a Christian country. It's a nominal Christian country. So now we have a beast coming up out of a largely unpopulated area, the same place where Christians fled away from the Roman Empire, and it looks like a Christian country. We could stop right there. That's already, we could stop there. That describes the U.S. There's no way around it. There's no other nation that fits that description. Okay, but let's keep going. The timing is precise here. The timing is precise. So go back to Revelation. If you have your Bibles, go back to Revelation 13 and note the timing of this second beast in verse 11. It comes right after something interesting happens to the first beast. So Revelation chapter 13, verse 10. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience and faith of the saints. What is this talking about? Who has it been talking about for the previous chapter and a half, taking people captive and killing them? It's been the Roman Empire and then the Roman Catholic Church persecuting God's people. And then it says that power which leads others into captivity is itself going to go into captivity. And that same power that killed Christians with the sword is going to be killed with the sword. That is the same event as what's described in verse 3. It says, I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. So this is, again, the first beast, the sea beast, which we've discussed. This is the Catholic Empire, the Catholic Church ruling over Europe. That beast has a deadly wound, and then it says his wound is healed. And then in verse 10, it says, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. When did the Catholic Church get a deadly wound? And we're talking symbolically. When did they get a deadly wound? Well, it was at the end of their reign. And we've already said that their reign was 1,260 years. It started in 538 AD. It ended precisely in 1798 AD. To be precise, on February 15th, 1798, Napoleon of France sent his general Bonaparte to the Vatican. He took the Pope captive. This is a drawing of the event. It's such a famous event that there's drawings of it. Bonaparte Napoleon sent his general to capture the Pope, to take him captive. The Pope died in captivity. He that taketh into captivity shall be led into captivity. The Pope was taken into exile, into prison. He died in prison. France declared that the Vatican, which used to be the country of the Catholic Church, used to be its own country, was now a secular, non-religious country. And it was now a secular country, and it was no longer a religious country anymore. Declared that. And this was at the end of the 1,260 years exactly. That was the deadly wound of Revelation 13, chapter 10, or Revelation 13, verse 10. So that's the deadly wound. So we see there's a deadly wound that happens too. It's almost as one beast goes down, immediately another beast rises up in verse 11. So now we have the historical context. That's why I took so long giving you the background. Now we have the timing. So let me ask you a question, because there's the timing. 1798, that's the timing. What country was rising into power, rising up out of the earth in a largely unpopulated area that looked like a Christian nation in 1798? What country? There's only one country. There's only one country in the world, in all of history, that fits that description. A country that's rising up in a largely unpopulated area in 1798 that looks like a Christian country. Just as the Pope and the Vatican was getting its deadly wound, this country was rising to power. It's the United States. There's no other country in the world. What country was rising to power around 1798 that became a world superpower and looks like a Christian country? It's the USA, the United States of America. There's no, so this second beast of Revelation 13, the second beast from verse 11 and on, that's the United States. You want to know what's going to happen in the history, in the future in this country? Read the second half of Revelation 13. Mind you, the book of Revelation was written in 90 AD, almost 2,000 years ago. And it predicted not only the reign of the Catholic Church for 1,200 years, but it predicted when the end of the Catholic Church's reign would happen in 1798, and that another country, it predicted the US 1,800 years before it happened, 1,700 years. Hundreds of years before it happened, predicted the US. This is why I'm a Christian today, because nowhere, no other book in the world, nothing predicts the future like Bible prophecy does. Nothing else predicts the future like this. There is no other book in the world that has this detailed and accurate prophecies. You won't find it anywhere. Absolutely amazing. And we could stop right there. We could say that's enough. It's the US. It can't be anyone else. Right? It's a lamb-like Christian nation, rises up around 1798, and comes from a largely unpopulated area of people who were fleeing, Christians who were fleeing persecution from the Catholic Church. There's no one else. It's the Pilgrims. It's the United States. Which, by the way, 1798, the US was coming up out of the earth at that time. It was not yet a superpower. It was rising. Do you know that I believe it was the first session of Congress, or no, we were recognized by France as an independent nation, 1798. 1776, we declared independence, but that was the beginning of the Revolutionary War. It took a little bit of time, right? So this is 20 years later. The country had been established and was rising up by that time. And we were only on the East Coast. We were still rising, right, at that time. Okay, so that's the history. So this is a list of characteristics, and we're going to go through the rest of these really quick because we've already set the groundwork. It's pretty easy from here on out. It looks like a lamb. So we want to see the list of characteristics to identify the U.S. as the second beast of Revelation 13, the beast out of the earth. And remember, if you're coming in late, I'm a patriot. This is not meant to attack the U.S. I am a patriot. We did a whole lecture on the U.S. liberties. Love this country. But Bible prophecy tells you the good, bad, and the ugly. Just think about the way God describes David in the Old Testament. There's lots of good, but there's also lots of bad. And so we're going to get the warts as well in America. So yes, it is the beast of the second beast of Revelation chapter 13. So let's look at the characteristics. It looks like a lamb, which is a Christian country, but it speaks like a dragon. That's coming in the future. I mean, we've seen a little bit of it. You can already see the U.S. is not a perfect country. It arises at the right time, as the first beast was getting its deadly wound, going into captivity. It comes from a largely unpopulated area. We've already looked at this. We've already looked at this. Dry earth. Dry land. By the way, this is an artist depiction of Revelation 13. You have the first beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. The crowns are on the head, are on the horns. The other beast is a lamb-like beast, right? He's bringing fire down from heaven. So pretty cool artist depiction. They used to do this. They used to put these kind of pictures in Bibles in the back because study of prophecy was so important to the reformers. So it's a beast that looks like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. Okay, so we've already talked about that. It comes from a largely unpopulated area. That's the U.S. I mean, yes, there were Native Americans here, but when the European diseases were brought over, I mean, it was the vast majority. The place was already very sparsely populated, but the vast majority of Native Americans died off very quickly. And so there wasn't a big, powerful nation here that needed to be conquered. Definitely wasn't like Europe. Here's the other characteristics. It was a republic, or it is a republic. Let's look at this. This is fascinating, this list of characteristics here found in Revelation 13. Okay, Revelation 13, verse 14, it's a republic. Verse 14, it says, and deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had a wound by the sword and did live. Now we're going to talk about that image of the beast for a second, but I want you to notice the relationship between the government and the people. Here the government is telling the people that they should do something. The beast says to those who dwell on the earth, says to the people, so the country, the nation, the government is saying to the people that they should do something. This is a representative democracy or a republic. It's the same thing. A representative democracy where you have representatives that you vote for, but the people also vote, and they're telling the people you should do this. That's a republic. Right there, Revelation 13, verse 14. You don't see the other beasts described like this. It's a republic. Okay, so check. Fits all these characteristics. Next one. It has a worldwide influence. Revelation 13, verse 16. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads. So that is worldwide influence. Does the United States have worldwide influence? Absolutely. Absolutely it does. I mean, the most powerful nation in the world. Revelation 13, verse 17, it's an economic superpower. Revelation 13, verse 17, and that no man may buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. We don't have time to go into what the mark of the beast is right now. That's not the point, but I want you to notice that this beast has power over the economy of the world. It says no man can buy or sell unless you go along with the mark of the beast. So is that an economic superpower? Absolutely it is. That would fit the United States. And then it says it will create an image to the first beast. And we're almost done here. An image to the first beast. We already read this verse. Let's read it again. Verse 14. And deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. That's the first beast. Saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by the sword and did live. So in other words, the beast that received the deadly wound, the first beast. So it says that they should make an image to the first beast. A mere image. Okay, what does that mean? Well, the word image evokes the idea of a statue and evokes the idea of an idol. And this is very similar to what we see in the book of Daniel, I believe it's chapter 3, with the Nebuchadnezzar's tower that he makes everyone worship. In fact, you'll see that tower is 60 by 6 by 6 cubits, 666. It's parallel. Daniel and Revelation are sister books. Very similar. But the word image has another meaning, because there's lots of meaning here in prophecy. And this is the last book of the Bible. It reminds you of the first book of the Bible, where it says, where God comes and he says, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And it's similar to when you look in a mirror, you see an image of yourself, something similar, right? So the idea here is this country, which looks like a lamb, it looks like a Christian country, is going to speak like a dragon. It's going to be made into the image of the first beast. It starts as a republic, as a lamb-like beast, but eventually it's going to become like the first beast. It's going to turn bad. It's going to become similar to what the Catholic Church was in the Dark Ages. So what was the first beast in Revelation 13 like? Because that's the future of America. We're going to become like that, sadly. The answer, the first beast was an apostate church. It was a fallen apostate church with idol worship and all kinds of corruption, and just completely apostate church, which is predicted in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. The falling away. It was an apostate church united with the state, an apostate church and state united, forcing a counterfeit version of Christianity. That's Catholicism. I'm sorry. I'm not talking about Catholic people. I'm talking about the religion. It is a counterfeit of Christianity. It's not real Christianity. It's not. I mean, they teach that his death didn't pay for all of your sins. Some of them you have to burn yourself for and pay for your own sins in purgatory. That's heresy. That is an insult to the cross. That's an insult to Christ. They teach that indulgences, that you can do certain actions and get yourself forgiveness by those actions, or pay certain things and get forgiveness. This is heresy. That's not Christianity. They teach that you go to a man and confess to a man, and he decides whether or not you're forgiven and what the penalty is. So many Hail Marys, blah, 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 and you're fine, right? That is not Christianity. Christianity is you go straight to Jesus and he did it all. And all you have to do is believe and repent, and he takes care of it all. You don't need to do so many Hail Marys. You don't need to go to a priest. You don't need to pay anything or indulgences. You don't need to go to purgatory for however many hundreds of years to burn for your own sins. That is all an insult to the cross of Christ. He died for our sins, all of them. You don't need to there's nothing you can do, right? He wants you to have a reformed life, but you can't earn forgiveness. Right? So but they took this counterfeit version of Christianity, which was really just a way of taking power. You have to come to the priest, and you can only be saved if you get this special bread and special wine, which you can only get from us, right? It was a way of taking the church and turning it into a power structure to have power over the minds of the people. And it was forced by law. And you were burned at the stake if you just wanted to own a Bible. What's crazy to me is people are waiting for a tribulation to come in the future, waiting for the Antichrist, when there was a time for 1,200 years where you couldn't own a Bible that you could read. You couldn't go out and preach the simple gospel that Jesus died for all of our sins, and that you don't need to have indulgences or purgatory or any of this nonsense. You couldn't preach that without being killed by church leaders for 1,200 years. And people don't think that was the Great Tribulation. That was the Great Tribulation, friends. That was the Antichrist. It's already happened. We're very close to the end of time. Those things have already happened. So that's what the beast, the first beast out of the sea, that's what it was. Church and state united, enforcing by law counterfeit Christianity. So according to Revelation 13, what does the future look like for America? It's the same thing. This country is going to become an image to the beast, a mirror image to the beast. So, to summarize, all of these characteristics, every single one of these things, America and only America fits the description of the beast, the second beast of Revelation 13. Only America fits every single one of these. We've gone over them in detail. You can't just guess when it comes to Bible prophecy. You can't just say, well, this is what I think. It fits in history, every single one of these things. Only America does. Now, what's going to happen, this thing, the image to the first beast, that's still happening in the future. That's still coming. So the question is, how could this possibly happen, right? How can this possibly happen in the land of the free in America? How can we become an image to the first beast? It says, and he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes, that's force, the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. This is forced religion, forced counterfeit Christianity, just like the Papal Dark Ages, church and state united. How could this possibly happen in America where we have freedom of religion? I'll tell you how. It says it right there in Revelation 13. It'll be very easy. It says he did astounding miracles, even making fire flash down to the earth from the sky while everyone was watching. And with all the miracles he was allowed to perform on behalf of the first beast, he deceived all the people. False miracles. That's how we're going to get church and state united in America and have a counterfeit version, a popular counterfeit version of Christianity enforced on the masses. This is Satan's ultimate trick. His ultimate trick. Basically, what he's doing in this country today, and we're almost done, is he's taken us so far left, so insanely far to the left, that we are going to beg to go back to a time when God is more involved. And that will be a good thing at first because we've gone so far left, we're going to come back to the middle, go back to a reasonable time, but eventually the pendulum will swing too far in the other direction, and we're going to go back to the time like it was during the Dark Ages, during the Papal Dark Ages, where church and state united and religion is enforced by law. We're going to go past just morality laws. Remember, we talked about this before. Morality laws is fine. Let's do morality laws. Yes. Ban gay marriage. Yes. Let's make it illegal to trans kids and all this kind of stuff. Let's go back and have morality laws. Let's make it. I'm even for banning gay adoption and bringing back no fault divorce laws. Let's do that. That's the second table of the Ten Commandments. But we're going to go too far, and instead of just enforcing morality laws between human and human, now we're going to go too far, and we're going to say we're going to enforce the first table of the Ten Commandments, which are the laws dealing with your relationship between you and God. And we're going to, in this country, we're going to have religious laws. This is beyond just things like, yeah, let's ban abortion. Absolutely. I think we should ban it all across the country. That's a morality law. It's just murder, right? We should outlaw murder, no problem. When you go so far that you're doing what the Catholic Church did during the Dark Ages, where you're saying only the church that the government approves, it'll start with, well, we should only have Christianity in this country because it should be a Christian nation, right? But the question is, who gets to decide what kind of Christianity? Once the government's involved, the government ruins everything it touches. That's what government does. And so once government's involved in the church, you're going to get counterfeit Christianity enforced by law. And how will this happen? How will the people go for this? False miracles. It says he brings fire down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And it says he deceives the people using the false miracles. Revelation 13, verse 13 through 14. That is what's described. Think about this. When was a time in the Bible when fire was called down from heaven? Because Revelation is just quoting the Old Testament. It's a mosaic of the Old Testament. When was a time when fire was called down from heaven? Here's an artist depiction here of Elijah calling down fire from heaven in the Old Testament. And there's another time where Solomon prays and fire comes down and consumes the sacrifice. And it's fire from God out of heaven. And Elijah prayed and he said, this is the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel in the Old Testament. There's the prophets of Baal, the false prophets of the false God, and there's Elijah, the prophet of the true God. And he says, whoever calls to their God and their God answers by fire from heaven, let him be known as the true God. And the people said, it's a fair deal. Let's see. And the prophets of Baal, they had their little sacrifice and they called on Baal and asked for Baal to bring fire from heaven, and nothing happened. And then Elijah came and he found fire from heaven. He prayed to God and God sent fire down from heaven and consumed the sacrifice, which proved that God was on Elijah's side. That's the point. What Revelation is warning us is that there is going to be a time where God allows the devil to perform false miracles to prove, quote unquote, that God is on that side. But it's going to be false. God warns us beforehand. There's going to be a time. This is also found in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. There's going to be a time where false miracles are used to deceive the people to make you think God's on that side. That's how powerful the deception will be. Guys, the devil doesn't need to trick. He doesn't need to trick the devil worshipers and the atheists. He needs to trick Christians. How does he trick Christians? He does it with fake miracles. And you may think, man, that is really hard. How are people going to know the difference? Prophecy. He wrote it down 2,000 years before it happened. He warns you. Why does God allow such a great deception to happen? Why? Because we're not reading our Bibles anyway. In this country, we're not following the Bible anyway. Look at how immoral this country is. How immoral even the churches are. Not following the Bible anyway. And so God gives up men to what they want. If you want to be deceived, if you don't want the truth, he lets you be deceived. And that is how far this country have fallen. From where it started to where it is today, sadly speaking, this country has fallen morally. And so God allows them in the final deception. At the end of time, he allows the devil to perform miracles to prove, quote unquote, that God's on that side. And to say, look, we need to have forced religion, forced counterfeit Christianity, and even does miracles to prove it. That is the final deception that is coming to America. Friends, you better be in your Bibles. You better know your Bibles, because what is coming, Jesus says it would deceive even the very elect, if possible. The idea there is that people who claim to be Christian are going to be deceived. But this is the warning. This is the warning. Right now is the time for the warning. Don't despise the warning. Listen. So that's what's coming. America is going to become an image to the beast. And our next lesson is going to show exactly how that's going to happen. So our final lesson, you do not want to miss this: the rise of Christian nationalism, and the image to the beast. Again, I'll be very clear. Like I said before, morality laws are a good thing. Laws that are based on the second table of the Ten Commandments, good thing. Laws that are based on the first table of the Ten Commandments, your relationship between you and God, government should stay out of it. But unfortunately, that's where we're headed. The rise of Christian nationalism and the image to the beast, You're not going to want to miss this. Friends, remember the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There's a lot of good people who are trying to take this country back, and I applaud that. But unfortunately, Bible prophecy predicts they're going to go too far. Don't miss our next one. Thank you for sticking through with this one. This one is a little longer than I normally do. Please like, share, subscribe. If you were blessed by this, please share it, like, subscribe on YouTube, on Instagram, Facebook, X, and even on Rumble. We are live right now, and this will be posted as a video as well later. Thank you. Share this with your friends. God bless, and we will see you next time.